All right, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. I'd like to welcome the audience who have come to see the last panel of the day, and also to our online guests who are watching as well. Definitely would like to thank the European Commission, DG Grow in particular, for holding this event. It's been an excellent 2 days and excited about tomorrow. We've talked about a lot of very interesting things about single market barriers, how to make the EU better, how to deal with energy. But now we're going to be looking at a very important topic on how to ensure we have sustainability, and how do we have that sustainability in our supply chains and in companies that have to source products, make products, manufacture, distribute, transport, and sell these products, and then probably even recycle all that across a very long value chain. How do we know what the impact on CO2 is? How are we making sure that we are actually adhering to important regulations that goes beyond just CO2, but also many social issues as well? How can we, track that? And digital, of course, as I would say, because I'm Ray Pinto, by the way, of Digital Europe, and this is our panel. And we strongly believe that in many cases, when you're looking at a lot of challenges facing Europe, facing the world, if it's education or if it's healthcare, digital is usually a very strong enabling answer. And I think today, on this topic, it's still very much the case. So I'm going to introduce my panel, but as I do that, I want to offer you as the audience, and those of you online, to answer a poll that we've had, for us to get a sense of what your thoughts are on the topic. So I'm just going to click on that. There we go. Survey is active. And it's not showing. There we go. So if we just put that up on the screen, if we fast forward to 2030, okay, let's try that again. Okay. So if we put that up on the screen, the question is, if we fast forward to 2030, what is the biggest game changer in the digital supply chain of management? Is it AI and machine learning? Is it blockchain technology? Is it the Internet of Things? Or is it quantum computing? Hopefully it's showing up on your phones. Is it showing up on your phones? Yes? Okay, I see heads nodding. Great. Okay, it's not up on our screen, but it's showing on the there we go. Okay. So what is the game-changing technology? Please answer this. Please answer it online. And I'd like to introduce our panel. So today we're very sorry. I keep having this thing slipping off. I should have said funny ears, but there we go. I was born this way. So if we look at our panel, we have, I think, the right expert audience and panel as well to answer these questions. So to my left, we have Klaus Holzknecht, right? You're Vice President of the Customer Data Office, Technology and Innovation of SAP. And I think very important to highlight, SAP is probably one of Europe's greatest treasures and leaders in the technology domain. But equally so, we have another great technology leader that's also European from ABB, and that is Sarah Cantanillo. You're the Chief Procurement Officer at ABB as well, Electrician Distribution Solutions.
Exactly.
And then finally, to make sure that you're going to keep us real, is the European Commission, and that's Amaryllis Verhoeven, Head of Unit of the Digital Transformation of Industry at the European Commission at DG Grow. So before we begin, let's just have a look. Wow, okay. I think the numbers are coming in very strong. So the biggest game changer, I guess not really a surprise, is AI and machine learning. Coming in as second is blockchain technology. I'd love to hear how and why people think that's the case. And Internet of Things comes in at 17. And then, even though processing power is probably the most important thing, with a small 8% is quantum computing. So And just before I begin, let me just talk about processing power for a second. I just realized that we did an anniversary of getting humans to the moon. They were using the processing power that was 1,000th of the power of your mobile phone. Your mobile phone is 1,000 times more powerful than the computers used to land humans on the moon and return them back on the Apollo mission. So imagine quantum computing, what we can achieve with all that processing speed and power. Okay, didn't change the numbers though. All right, let's kick this off. I'd like to actually, if you don't mind, kick off with Sarah. And Sarah, I want to know a little bit about what is ABB doing in this space? How can you ensure across, your value chain that the suppliers are obeying the rules, being more efficient, looking at their CO2? How does that work? Tell me.
Yeah. So first of all, hello everybody. Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure being here. I'm a bit voiceless today, but hopefully we can manage. So let me explain you a little bit what are the main initiatives in terms of digital transformation in ABB. So first of all, we are implementing across overall ABB a cloud-based solution, which is basically a platform we are using to exchange data and information with our vendors. When I talk about data, I'm referring to a huge variety of data. So it can be information we use to qualify a company as a potential vendor for ABB, for example, or data we use to perform risk assessment in terms of financial solidity of our supply base, geopolitical risk in case we have a single source located potentially in high-risk cost country, and so on and so forth. Then you exchange data about drawings, for example, or sustainability. So I'm referring to CO2 emissions, circularity, and so on. Then when we talk about artificial intelligence type of solution, we are going live right now with a pilot in order to manage our RFQ process. RFQ means that we are asking multiple vendors to quote for the same project. So this tool is actually able to receive this data, read them through, interpret, compare, and then pick up what the best solution is for our business. We are also exploring an additional opportunity, which is a tool which is able to cross-check the analysis on the market trend and our stock coverage in order to help us to eventually predict a material's unavailability story and so on. Last to mention, we are implementing in waves across ABB a so-called supply chain collaboration tool, which is basically a solution which is integrated with our local ERP in order, for instance, to automatically transmit purchase order or receive and manage vendor invoice, manage consignment stock. So basically, I mean to say that this is a solution aimed to really manage end-to-end the entire procure-to-pay process. So I think these are the main initiatives, but we are really emphasizing this a lot across overall ABB in order to increase the awareness in our all employees first, but also somehow helping our vendors to adopt and to adapt to this new environment. And I think we can say we are quite confident that we will be successful on this one and quite excited for the results coming in.
Well, Sarah, that's interesting. And I think when you think about procurement, maybe government should look at that model as well on getting procurement. And I'll be very interested to hear, Sarah, as to, when you're getting the vendors on board, what arguments are you using? What benefits do they get? Obviously, if they want to sell to you guys, or they have to do it. But what is the main advantages that you see?
Yeah, I think I see clearly a few main benefits which are actually in common for ABB, but also for our vendors, for our suppliers, right? So the first one is data transparency, because for instance, once we have data available, we are in a better position for planning in advance materials unavailability situation. Or still on sustainability, right? We can better assess our sustainability situation. Now I'm mainly referring to the CO2 emissions. So together we can join our forces and develop the proper action plan. But of course, it's not just a matter of data transparency, which is then triggering all these different benefits. It's also a matter of productivity, because the more we automatize our process and the less amount of time our employees and vendors need to invest on fine-tuning the process, eventually reconciling the numbers, and also eventually fixing the possible mistakes coming from human intervention. And last but not least, I think I see as a potential benefit the opportunity to build commonly shared dashboard. And I think the biggest potential here still is on the sustainability area, where we could join our forces and together share data in order to really drive together this sustainable transition. And once again, I think that so far these arguments work pretty well in order to convince our vendors and to get them on board. Still a long way to go, so I don't want to be naive in being over-optimistic, but I think at least a clear and promising direction is there.
Without making any forward statements, and maybe you're not allowed to say, but when do you think this will be fully implemented?
I think we need to distinguish initiative by initiative, so we are not at the same implementation stage across all of them. But I think if I consider the target which is in our mind, I think a couple of years more, and we should be there.
A couple of years. Very good, very good. Okay. Let's move to our next speaker. If I could just ask the tech team to put on the clock, otherwise there's a good risk I'll be talking too much and run over, and you don't want that. So please put the clock up there. So, great, excellent. All right, so Klaus, you're from SAP, right? SAP was born to do this, and I think there could be no greater time where we need a technology and a solution to be able to track and trace all this information, even geographically. So can you just tell us a little bit more of what it is the technology solution? We're not all experts, right? You know, how does it work?
Yeah, so I think SAP is well known for software that supports business processes and also in procurement process. We do have solutions in our portfolio.
Just lower a little bit. Okay, good.
Is it better now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, much better.
Okay. So I think our heritage is more from the finance side, but since a few decades also procurement and integrated that with all the other parts of the business is a big topic. And we do deliver software, cloud software, that supports procurement, all the things you just mentioned, collaboration. And it used to be very much let's say a two-party thing, so that someone buys from someone else. It now turns more into a network that gets or has more transparent information about the different tiers and different parties that are involved. And we do, and that is what most people do not know, we do not only provide that software, we also run business networks. So we have a network where we connect suppliers and buyers, and we have several millions of suppliers, for example, on that network in, I think, 190 countries. And they transact more than 700 million transactions per year that are worth $5 trillion of dollars. So that is massive, and we are already doing this. And are also participating now in all these innovation campaigns, like in Germany, there's in the automotive sector, there's Catena X, that goes away from just connecting a buyer and a supplier, but getting the full transparency across the supply chain so that you also know your tier 1, tier 3, tier 1, 2, and 3 suppliers, and also across the life cycle of the product that you also understand, and when you dismantle it or want to recycle it in the circular economy, how that all fitted together and which parts are used where and where they came from. So we provide software for that, not only in the European Union, globally. Typically our customers are large companies that have supply chains that are global. So therefore we also have to fulfill a lot of different regulations and site conditions. I think none of our customers, or large customers, has a supply chain that's only based in Europe. It always stretches out to Asia and other countries.
Okay. And every time I've been talking, and because obviously in Digital Europe, we see the benefits of digital, but we always hear the obstacles of adoption. One of the ones we hear time and time again is the upfront cost of implementing such a system, and it's very difficult. We don't know how to implement it. So how do you address those resistance points?
So I mentioned it's a cloud system.
Yeah.
It's a network. Maybe in easy terms, you can imagine like Amazon for businesses. Yeah, if you're a supplier, you have to onboard yourself, your company onto that platform, and then off you go. So it's not that you have to implement a complicated software on your own. It's much easier nowadays. So I think that addresses that topic already. Obviously, things are complicated, but you only have to onboard to one platform. And if we come up with standards and things like, again, mentioning Catena X, maybe for the whole industry, you only have to connect and onboard to one platform and not to each of your partners or vendors' platform. So that should make it much easier then.
Okay, okay. You've talked a little bit about, and by the way, I do wish you will become the Amazon for business, as big as they are. But we've talked a little bit about the advantages of using such a system. You mentioned the word predictability.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the word traceability. You've already said ease of use. Can you give us a little bit more kind of insight? What does that predictability, how does that look like? How's that work? You know, what can a customer expect, you know, when they're going to take on a system like that?
Yeah. So first of all, it's getting the visibility or transparency how your supply chain looks like, and not only with your direct suppliers, but across the tiers. And you might figure out that even so you have a great strategy, that you have multiple vendors, it all comes back to one single bottleneck in your tier 2 or tier 3. I mean, we were all surprised with recent events, like I think the first one was in Thailand, that flood, that 2011, I think, that all of a sudden everyone figured out that most of the hard disks are produced in Thailand. And even if you could ask any hard disk vendor at that time, they all had shortages because the factories were all standing in Thailand and were flooded. So you can find out with having the full transparency across the whole supply chain, if you have certain risks and bottlenecks, then further down, deeper in your supply chain. Obviously with that, you can then have a better planning if you also share, let's say, inventory or fulfillment information, that you not only rely on your direct supplier, but you also have transparency in where they get their material from, or their parts, and where they get the materials from, and can have a much better risk assessment and planning. And then you can also, let's say, if for quality management, they are recalled, certain products have defects, and you need to inform maybe all the people who have parts that include that defect. It's much easier to do this via one platform where everyone is connected than maybe connecting to all the different platforms or individual solutions of all your partners. So that is also part of the things that a platform can do. And obviously that only works if it's really end-to-end. And therefore another thing is that it needs to be interoperable. So we, as much as we would like to have everyone being our customer, I think it's a little bit unrealistic, and we would have a different discussion if everyone was. Then there needs to be open standards, and things need to work together so that you can have that end-to-end view. Even so, not all the people or entities and not everyone is using SAP software, but maybe similar or competitive software.
Okay, that's great. All right, thank you very much. So I'd like to thank the business for speaking to both of you. We will come back to you to look at some of the challenges, some of the solutions as well. So don't run away. But let us go to you, Amaryllis. And you know, this is not the first time we've shared a panel. I can trust on you also to ask our other panelists some questions. But I'd like to hear a little bit on your side. What is the Commission thinking about, right? You know, there are some strong rules and regulations. This is why they need to track and trace all this stuff along the supply chains. But how do you see it, and what do you see in the future?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting indeed. Tracking and tracing is for us a clear use case. A use case showing how digital tools can really help our businesses. You know that as part of the digital decade, you know, big ambition of the Commission, we want to make sure that our companies, and I mean every company in Europe, can and does make use of digital solutions in order to become more competitive, in order to be more resilient, in order to be greener. And indeed, tracking and tracing, digital tracking and tracing can really help us here, we believe. So where do we stand as a European Commission? Let me tell you, everybody today is talking about the digital product passport, and that's going to be a big lever to make digital tracking and tracing happening, because we are talking about very concrete obligations that will be imposed in companies in many sectors. But before that, there has already been an important initiative which is actually going to deliver fruit very soon, by the end of the year. And here I'm taking a step back also in my own career. In my previous job, I was not in charge of digital transformation. I was in charge of IP, intellectual property. And when you talk about IP to businesses, you immediately hear the word counterfeiting. Counterfeiting is an enormous challenge for a lot of businesses. And counterfeiting has been exacerbated because of global supply chains, where businesses just find it very difficult to control, even their own supply chains. So supply chain integrity is a huge challenge. Yeah? And with that in mind, together with the EU IPO, we organized years ago what we called a blockathon, which is basically an initiative to say, okay, fine, how can we use new technologies? And actually, we were thinking these days about blockchain. Not that as a Commission we are not technology neutral, we are. But, you know, at that time we were thinking, okay, what can blockchain here do for us in order to make sure that all steps in the supply chain are really monitored and are being put on a secure ledger so that everybody knows what's going on throughout the supply chain. Following that, an infrastructure is now being built. It's called the anti-counterfeiting infrastructure. It is based open source, and it will go live at the end of 23. So it will be put up the market as a model. Again, the aim here is very much to help trademark owners control their supply chains. And the help is built in such a way that there is immediate links also to the enforcement authorities, because that's the next steps you see. It's not enough to know that there might be a problem with counterfeits in your supply chain. It's also important that there is an immediate link to all the enforcement authorities, that they have the information. So there is a linking up with market surveillance authorities, there is a linking up with customs authorities, etc. Based on that experience, or at least in part based on that experience, we are now working on something where we actually do come forward with legislation this time, and that is the Digital Product Passport. Digital Product Passport fits into, I would say, the series of obligations that we are creating in order to make the Green Deal happen, the transition to a greener economy. There we're asking businesses to be transparent about how green and how sustainable their production is. And with that in mind, there will be an obligation soon for products in various sectors. We start with batteries, but then the same rules will apply for textiles and toys, etc., to use a kind of a digital product passport. Now, how do you do that? Businesses are, oh, digital product passport seems to be very complicated. Again, it should not be complicated. Here, we're not, as a commission, prescribing one model. That would be very anti-competitive. We know that there is many service providers out there, and for us, it's fine, as long as a digital product passport will do what it is meant to do under the regulation. Yeah? I hear the panelists already speak about the importance of standards and interoperability. And with that in mind, even though we are still finalizing the relevant pieces of legislation, we have already sent the first requests to come up with standards to standard-setting bodies in order to make sure that we will have, indeed, in due time, open standards allowing then the digital businesses to reap the benefits and come in and to deliver the solutions basically to all the industries across the supply chain. So these are just two examples. I very much also see that in the future we will have the digital product passport, but you know very well that there is also new obligations coming up in terms of monitoring supply chains for forced labor. There is ESG reporting, etc. For all these solutions, my dream and my hope would be is that we can replicate the same business models and find solutions which are interoperable so that we can give to our businesses across Europe the digital tools they need in order to comply with all these new requirements and wishes in a very easy manner.
No, thank you very much, and I'm glad you raised what we call the DPP, or the Digital Product Passport. I think that when we look at that, we have to be careful, on how that's done. We've got to listen to industry very carefully. We've got to make sure we're not automatically mandating, data sharing, for example. But already there are companies that are seeing some clear opportunities with the DPP in creating these type of technologies that Klaus was talking about. We have other members, European ones, Siemens and Schneider, that can create. I've seen one example where they can flash a product. So if you're dealing with a fuel pump in the desert or somewhere in a remote area, you can flash a QR code and you can see its end-to-end, CO2 footprint from beginning, to end, and it's very clear, and it's a very functional way to track and trace these things. And so, you can also check on maintenance, for example. We've heard about reducing cost, right? In the healthcare system, probably has the highest amount of waste of resources that you can think of, and it's a very expensive cost burden on the state to have, basic healthcare. And these digital technologies can make sure you're removing all that waste and all that duplication. And I'm going to give you another poll because I want to get to the next segment of our conversation. So we'll just pop that up here. So when we'll put that up on the screen, it should be showing up on your screens at home and on your phone. But imagine the EU as a world leader in industrial digitalization by 2030. And I hope, Amaryllis, we don't have to imagine too hard. I hope you'll help us get there. But pick one bold step that the EU should focus all its energy in delivering. Oh, numbers are already coming in fast. A barrier-free single market, a radical makeover of education and training systems, or the swapping of regulations for incentives to digitalize SMEs. So we'll let the numbers come in. I think it's already getting quite stable. I also would like the audience at home and here in front of me to start thinking about questions. I can see your questions up on my screen. We'll also have an opportunity later on for you to put up your hand and ask questions as well to our panelists. But in the meantime, it looks like they're not too far. We see pretty much 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but wow, okay, it's still moving. Now it's definitely 1/3, 1/3. So it looks like our audience at home and here see very much that We need to have incentives for SMEs to digitalize, right? Not easy. We need a barrier single-free, single market. And we're going to touch upon that in the next segment, I assure you. And we also need a radical makeover of education. So with that, maybe I can go back to you, Klaus. We'll work the other way this time. I'd like to talk a little bit about the challenges, right? For you, what are the challenges? I'm just thinking of millions of users. You have big supply chain. Like, what challenge do you see in putting in these systems across the planet?
Yeah. So, as I said, it's globally, so there are many different global rules and regulations we have to comply with. So we do not build software for one country or one region or one set of regulations. We build, ideally, software that works globally and can be configured according to the local regulations. That means we always have to think maybe a level higher, what are the main principles that are behind these regulations? And there are good examples, like in the past for data privacy. There are different data privacy laws out there, but they more or less have all the same principles. Yeah, you have to have a legal basis, maybe consent. You have to make things transparent. If you make decisions about humans, it has to be explainable. People have the right to be informed, deleted. The data has to have a certain retention time and be deleted, and so on. More or less, that are the principles that work across the world. If we implement these in our software in a configurable way, and we have a very large globalization department that then takes these capabilities of the software and implements them according to the specific rules and laws of the country, that is the way we would like to work. So it has to be clear what are these general terms are and how they are implemented. Then we can also deliver software globally because, as I said before, all the supply chains are global nowadays. The other thing that we can't do very much about is that we typically have our business relationship with one party, and if they want to share data with their suppliers or their customers, it's their choice. There again, we also have to make the software in a way, and it might be different in completely different industries to what level of depth they want or need to share things. So there as well, we have to build software that is flexible enough so that everyone can make that decision on their own, and that this works across the globe and across all industries.
So let me ask you something, Klaus. The GDPR, right? This is a regulation that makes sure that me as a European citizen, my data is protected. It's a very important regulation.
Yep.
But now Vietnam's going to come up with their own GDPR.
Yeah,
Maybe
but as
Brazil
I said,
will come up with another.
The principles are more or less the same
it will
wherever
work
you
then.
look. So we typically take the GDPR as the core and implement that, of course. We are a European company. But what we see is that if we implement these principles in a flexible way, we are pretty quick and good in adapting to other similar laws out there.
Okay. What about our good friend, the AI Act, that's coming out?
Yeah, okay. I hope that's similar because we see different AI regulations coming up and they all, more or less also have the same principles. I mean, there it would really be good to understand, especially now with the generative AI, what is the stance of the EU according for that. So in all our software, we build in AI at every feature or every functionality. So in supply chain, we have AI to understand certain patterns and early warn maybe because certain situations are going to occur. We have AI in there to predict certain things, to simulate and recommend the next best activity. So AI is built in everywhere. And if we now are confronted with different regulations across the world, and maybe it goes to the extreme that some country bans certain Gen AI things, which happened in the past, that would really be a struggle. And currently, I think the whole Gen AI stuff is so new that there is a lot of uncertainty also from our customers to understand, can I now integrate something like the latest Gen AI model that comes from some company in the US? or is that maybe illegal in Europe? So I hope that we get over this uncertainty very soon, and that we get to standards and clear responsibilities, who's now responsible for what, because it's not only us who are building that AI. In the concrete case, it's a company in the US that builds the, let's say, large language model. Then it's some cloud provider, hyperscaler, that makes that available in the EU. We might be using that cloud provider's infrastructure to build our own software, and then we are selling it to our customers, and they are using that on. So there are a lot of people in there, and it has to be clear who's responsible, starts and ends where, and how you can also standardize or certify yourself that you are doing what you're supposed to and covering in a compliant way.
I think you framed that problem very, very clearly, and it's almost you're shouting out what needs to be done is an international framework. We need this dialogue to happen globally amongst governments to come to an agreement, right?
Yeah.
The best way to tackle climate change can be, having the COPs, but if AI can help solve climate change or help solve serious health issues, we need to get there fast and make sure there's a common agreement on areas, like you said, standards and other areas. Thank you, Klaus. And there's this, one other area that we were talking a little bit previously. You mentioned that Germany has this Supply Chain Act, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Amaryllis. I know you don't follow this area. We have been talking to your colleagues in the European Commission that when you have what's now known as the CS3D, the Corporate Social Responsibility of Due Diligence Act, we said it has to be a regulation because we need this harmonized. And it goes back to the panel yesterday that we did on the need to harmonize these rules. Because if Germany has their own rule, and then France creates their other one, and we don't have full harmonization amongst the member states, then we can't have sustainability. It's just that simple. And, I still don't understand why to this day. And we sent letters to the Commissioner Renders to try and get that answer. How do we get full harmonization? And I hope we get there. But not a question for you to answer. You can if you'd like. But I'd like to go to you, Sarah. What challenges are you seeing, here in the EU or even internationally?
Yeah, this makes me smile a little bit because I think my answer will match perfectly the answer I see there in Slido. So mainly, I would like to refer to two main challenges. So the first one is, generally speaking, of course I'm generalizing, but a lack of digital skills at our employee side, because while driving this digital transformation, we assume all the people are ready to embrace it. And maybe conceptually they are, but the problem is they might miss actually the digital skills required to implement and lead a digital transformation successfully. So I think that's the first challenge I see. The second one is that there is not the same maturity level and readiness level for digital transformation across the overall industry, meaning the big corporation like the one we may be, actually I think are quite ready, or anyway, they are getting ready and evolving in terms of digital transformation. But probably is not the case when it comes about small or medium-sized company. But the problem is, or the point is, that we all belong to the same value chain. So in order to be successful in implementing a regulation, a sustainability transformation, transition, a digital transformation, in reality, we need at least a minimum certain readiness level across the overall end-to-end value chain. So again, I think then, summarizing in this second point, I think we may need to be more focused on how we can improve the readiness level at small and medium-sized companies, which I think is exactly, again, what I read there.
Yeah, I think so you talk about two things, in my opinion. You kind of pick two of those, right? The incentives for SMEs, build their awareness, adopt these, technologies, but also skills. And skills is the most common bandied word that you will hear in any political speech. But how do you do it when the competence of the education systems belong to the member states? And you cannot, it's in the treaty, you don't have the competence to make sure that there is one harmonized curricula, right, to ensure we have the skills and solve many, many problems. That is the greatest challenge. And how can we get the member states on board? It doesn't have to be education, Amaryllis. We could talk about many different things, but how do we get these guys on board? How do we get them to play together, right, like children in a sandbox? How do we get cooperation, to tackle some of these areas that you've heard?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Talking indeed about obstacles, unsurprisingly, I mean, you have spotted actually the three most important ones. Klaus, you said it, common rules, yeah, avoid fragmentation, do it in Europe. That's our greatest asset, the single market here, yeah. Single market should stand for a level playing field, and you know very well that I agree with you that we should go for maximum harmonization whenever we can, right? But so have a level playing field in the single market, and then also use our discussions, for instance, within the context of the TTC, in order to have immediately the same standards also worldwide. Yeah? So lever basically on our partnerships in order to get the same common rules and standards. With TTC, by the way, I'm referring to the Trade and Technology Council that we have with the United States, where we discuss things such as standards, AI, how to go about AI, etc. So rules, barrier-free single market, but then also you mention other things, and that is specific incentives for SMEs and skilling, right? Incentives for SMEs, I cannot agree more. And there I'm going to state something that was published, I think, a week ago, and that is basically a report indicating where we are with our so-called targets under the digital decade. Yeah? When the Commission, the start of the von der Leyen Commission came forward with its own ambitions, what is it we want to achieve by 2030 on digitalization? One of the targets is make sure that 90% of SMEs reach at least a basic level of digital intensity. Now, digital intensity does not mean having a website or an email address. That would be too easy. Yeah? It is really about making use of tools such as cloud and AI and these things. What do we see? That if we don't move up next year, by 2030 we will not be at 90%, we will only be at 60%. So we have indeed a huge knowledge gap to bridge there. And what we try to do is work with the SMEs. I mean, the digital innovation hubs have been created. The EN network has digital advisors. Also within the various ecosystems, we try to showcase. We have matchmaking programs. Matchmaking, very important, where we bring suppliers and SMEs together in order to learn what are the opportunities. Talking, showcasing, etc. Now, coming to skills. It's the year of skills, 23. Yeah? As you say, education, it's a national competence, it's not an EU competence, but we work a lot with member states in order to influence educational curricula. Closer to home, I am working in DG GROW. We launched a couple of years ago the so-called Pact for Skills. What is that? The idea is the following. Within each ecosystem, we use funds and we use our convening power to find a group of industry leaders and associations who basically come together and say, we're going to promote skilling. We're going to lead by example. We're going to take initiatives. We're going to work together. So they, amongst themselves, create networks. And actually, it's very interesting to watch. We built, in my unit, the so-called Patch for Digital Skills, which in the meantime is a large-scale partnership. Once it starts growing, once it takes off, it nourishes itself. It nourishes itself. It's basically a group of people, can be university hubs, can be assistance providers. In our case, it's also very much managed by the Digital SME Alliance, who come together and put in place programs in order to skill and train and help one another. So in that way, we hope indeed to get the skills up to speed because, yeah, you know, without skills and knowledge and awareness and a well-functioning single market, it is very difficult for useful digital business models to be incorporated.
Good, excellent, thank you, thank you. I'm now going to look to our audience. We have about 15 minutes left, so I'd like to see if our audience here has any questions. If you can just put on the screen the questions for the people at home. I see a gentleman that has a couple of people there. Before you speak, let me just read this one that Michael Elkington of NCC UK asked. And if you could put it up on the screen, that'd be great. He says, collecting data, and particularly ensuring it's correct, will have a significant cost. How well is the added value versus the cost trade-off understood? Now, I don't know if anyone on our panel wants to answer that question, but do you want to answer now, or do you want to take a couple of?
I mean, the answer is it depends, yeah.
Okay.
I think there are clear use cases in certain industries where it makes sense and it's clear what the benefit to each of the involved parties is. And I think there are others where it's not clear yet. So unfortunately, I think there is no general black or white answer. It's well understood. There are a lot of unknowns still, or potential for innovation. Yeah, that would be my answer.
Okay, okay. And I think, please send me some more questions, but let's go to this gentleman over here. If you could just introduce yourself, your name, where you're from, and then your question.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Tamid Chowdhury, and I work for the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, but I'm based in Brussels. We have an office there. I was just prompted by this conversation towards the end of what we really mean by digital skills, because I was just thinking about this for myself. You know, my brother is a data engineer, so I can understand that there's the deep, you know, coding and things like that. And say for myself, at one point I did for project management, I did an agile project management qualification, and I use it in policy where I can. It doesn't always work. My question is, the reason I'm kind of wanting to dissect a bit more is because one thing I'm wondering is it a bit, are we flattening it a little bit by just saying digital skills? What do we mean by that? Because, for example, would I have the skills if I wanted to become a product manager in some tech thing? Because then my thinking is, well, actually, the whole recruitment system would prevent that, even though I probably might have the skills, maybe not. So I'm not saying I do, but I'm just opening that up because it brings it less necessarily always about the education system, but also about the businesses and the willingness to kind of open up recruitment to a slightly broader audience and training and things like that. So yeah, I don't want to go on too much, but just I'd really be fascinated to understand a bit more.
It's a great question. I actually have an answer to that, if I may, as a moderator. But and please pass the microphone to this other gentleman. But let's get your question first. Again, introduce yourself and.
Hi, my name's Jack Lovell. I work for Cycling Industries Europe, so the bike industry. And I'm really happy I attended this discussion because it's really at the heart of discussions we're having at the highest level with our members right now. Because with the battery regulation, obviously e-bike batteries are also in the scope, and we need to get digital product passports up and running. We look at the Catenaix project with a lot of admiration. We're trying to find out a lot from that. But we're also a sector of mainly small SMEs, and the biggest companies in our sector, the biggest multinationals, they're dwarves compared to the automotive sector. And the discussions we have, I think the rationale for DPP is very, very clear to everyone, and all the themes you've touched upon are why we want to do it. But the companies we speak to are also completely overwhelmed by it, by the cost, by the cultural transformation it implies, by the change in practice. And what they ask for is basically, how do we get there step by step with baby steps? And I appreciate skills as part of the thing, but we're not going to reskill a sector in 3 years. So how do we get there?
Okay, I'm going to look to my panelists. Who wants to answer which question first?
I think I can shortly comment on the first one on digital
Okay.
skills, but then I will let you to comment further if you like. So first of all, I think we are generalizing a little bit. So probably not the general definition of digital skills may apply to all the cases, right? But in case of supply chain, in my industry, for example, I'm thinking that if we are going to implement a supply chain collaboration tool to communicate differently with the vendors, what practically speaking, what my buyers are supposed to do anyway is something slightly different versus they were used to so far. Or the same, if we're implementing platforms in order to collect data in one way which is completely different or RFQ differently, again, the set of skills which buyer, practically speaking, need to have are slightly or even significantly different versus the one they were used before. So we are also implicitly changing a little bit the scope of work of these people. So these are just a few examples of what I mean specifically in my case for digital skills, but surely there are many other different definitions. But what I mean to say is not necessarily we are referring to informatic type of skills, but it's something more implicitly contained on a daily business. I don't know if you want to complement further.
Okay. I'd like to pick up on the question, how will we as a company get there? The e-bikes. Indeed, the battery DPP is the first obligation that will go live in, I think, 27, right? That's the due date. So I can see that for many businesses, this is tomorrow. But that's exactly why I think it is very important to work on rules. And again, we're still finalizing the eco-design discussions that are crystal clear. So legal rules, legal requirements that are crystal clear, that are uniform, transparent, same across the whole EU, but then also technical specs that are very clear and standards which apply for everyone. And that's why we are now working with standard setting organizations in order to create a clarity of the framework. And then we hope that actually, on the basis of this, the service providers will pick up and will offer the solutions. And we're happy to organize matchmaking if that isn't happening. But we trust that if the framework of what exactly businesses are supposed to comply with, and what are basically the standards against which you have to live up technical and we come forward with then requirements which are based on open standards, interoperable standards, we create business opportunities for the supply side of the market to offer on a competitive basis the best possible solutions that hopefully can be picked up by everybody. That would be my dream. If that is naive, then let me know. How do you see things, dear panelists? How do we get there, by 27?
Yeah. So I would first like to answer the first question, and then I come back to this. So what kind of skills? And I think we all always think about coding skills and so on. Maybe that's not necessarily all. And since I'm responsible for data, I would like to add something that typically no one thinks of, that is nowadays called data literacy. So what we do not see that people are taught at school or anywhere else is how to work with data. And since everything is nowadays data-driven, a certain understanding of how to interpret data, maybe a little bit of statistics. I mean, I studied math and physics, and I know not everyone has the same background, but a little bit of understanding how to interpret data and how to draw conclusions and so on. I think that is also a very important skill nowadays. I don't think that everyone needs to know how to code. I don't think that everyone needs to be able to build their own AI. I use here, if I open my iPhone, I assume as all of you, I use fancy face recognition AI stuff. I have no clue how it works. So, and that is the same way we build in AI into our software. It should be built in. It's easy to use. You should not need to be an AI expert to use AI in certain products. But you need to understand a little bit of the background that maybe if AI is in your product and it generates now something that there is this hallucination that it's probabilistic, that things can go wrong, and you maybe need to adjust your working attitude also differently because it isn't rule-based and 100% clear. So I just want to make that point that we always think coding and AI skills is what we need, but maybe it's also a little bit more and a little bit different nowadays that not everyone needs to code, not everyone needs to be an expert in deep learning, neural networks, and so on, but we would still have a lot of innovation and advancements there. And now to the second point, how you get there. So I think, I hope that other industries will build a lot on what was done for Catena-X, and it will not be, let's say, as much effort for the second industry as it was for the first, so you can build on certain things that have already been done there. And as you said, if the rules are clear, the market, the companies will also find a way to make that possible for smaller and medium industries. I think it's obvious that if you're a large automotive OEM that has a huge complex product, I think a car currently has about 30,000 parts, and you have a very complex supply chain, that this is much more complicated than, I don't know how much a bike has, but I would assume less, much less, than to implement something like this. And if the technology, the platform is capable of doing it, we also have a huge ecosystem of partners that then typically helps our customers to implement and get onboarded on that if they don't have the skills on their own.
So thank you very much. And someone came in with another question on a different legislative area called the CSRD, so Corporate Social Responsibility Directive. And do SMEs in the EU supply chains have the data, knowledge, and skills and technology to meet those requirements that are coming? I think you answered that. I think it's going to be difficult, right? So I think, and we've noticed also something when it comes to these rules being put into place, and it's particularly, not in this case, but particularly when there is no full, harmonization, it's always the SMEs that suffer. And, they're the ones that take the brunt of this. So I'm going to now pass over to all of you. We have just 4 minutes left, so I'll give you an opportunity I'll be generous today and allow you to say whatever you want for a minute. But I want to go back to skills just a little bit, if I may, as moderator, that if you look at the EU tracking basic skills, what is basic skills? The ability to send an email, the ability to do a video conference, right? The ability to open a PowerPoint presentation. It was about 10 years ago, 43%. It's now higher, a lot higher. I don't know the number. If anyone knows the number, let me know. I think it's a lot higher, but still not perfect. And there's still a lot of discrepancy in geography in the EU, and particularly with gender, and we have to address that. But then when you look at the key skills we need, probably one of the most important in a conflict that we face now with Ukraine is cybersecurity skills, where our critical infrastructure, our utilities, the water, the lights are now at risk. Planes, trains. That is going to require a lot of member states working together. Digital Europe is actively doing this with our national trade associations to agree on what is that curricula that we need to teach people and teach them quickly and reskill them so that we can protect the EU, as importantly as possible, and make that a priority. So let me just quickly, maybe I can ask you, Amaryllis, to start. Let's take 30 seconds to a minute. Any final words?
Any final words? I'd like to go back to the single market. I think in the current context, I've been working myself on single market policies in one way or another for most of my career in the European Commission. But whatever challenge we're facing, we always come back to the single market. Earlier today, we had discussions here in the plenary about the global context in China and deglobalization, etc. And again, the answer was, let's harness the power of our single market. And I profoundly believe into that. I think that the greatest asset we have in order to go for the transformation that we need as industries in order to stay afloat, stay competitive in the world of tomorrow, but also the greatest asset we have, if we go on our ambition to become greener, lies in the single market. And I hope that we as legislators, we manage to convince the member states to stay true to the single market, because that's where usually the pain point comes. And if I may, and I'm abusing my 2 minutes, you're saying lack of maximum harmonization. I am facing the member states in council meetings, and member states increasingly ask for an exception to take care of their national situation. If we go on like that, there is no single market. And you, the companies, will suffer from that. So I'll stop it here.
Bravo, bravo. Thank you. And shame on them for doing that. Thank
I
you.
think so.
Sarah.
I will go quick then. So my last thought is about the importance of joining our forces. So whatever we are talking, either is sustainability or digital transformation, if we don't share the data wherever possible, if we don't join our forces among big corporations and SME, we simply can't be successful alone. Because as I said, we all belong to the same value chain. So it's really crucial that all together we are successfully driving the overall transformation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Klaus.
Yeah, so maybe again back to the EU AI Act and what I wish for, and that is a really consistent, harmonized, and also not overlapping regulation. And maybe to quote then something from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, when you see good design is when there's nothing more to add. No, sorry, I completely blew it up. It's not when there's nothing more to add, it's when there's nothing more to take away, because there's everything that has a very specific and non-overlapping purpose. So in that sense, I would wish for a good designed regulation that is consistent and hopefully very soon for the topic of AI.
Thank you very much. And as your moderator at Digital Europe, I want to thank the audience. I want to thank DG Grow for what I think is a very successful 2 days. Look forward to the third day. And I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon. Goodbye.
Okay.